Alabama, Mr. Palmer. The gentleman from Utah, Mr. Moore. The gentlewoman from Michigan, Mrs. McClain. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Reschenthaler. The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Rogers. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark. The gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar. The gentleman from California, Mr. Liu. The gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Del Bene. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse. The gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Underwood. The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Escobar. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Trahan. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Kildee.
A ceremonial aspect
the
of the State of the Union.
President of the Senate, at the direction of that body, appoints the following senators.
An escort committee assigned by the Speaker of the House to escort the President of the United States to the doors of the House chamber for his always memorable announcement by the Sergeant at Arms.
The Senator from Illinois, Mr. Durbin.
Yeah, what's happening right now is the Vice President, as the President of the United States Senate, is announcing the senatorial members of the escort committee. Also, an elaborate process, lots of names, lots of states references. It's just part of the important, formulaic theatrics of a State of the Union address. What that means is the President of the United States is on the Capitol complex. He is awaiting these distinguished members of the House and Senate to invite him to come to the chamber to await his introduction. Scott, what else do you hear or see?
Well, we see a little bit of shifting towards that center aisle as that moment's about to arrive. It really is going to be a sea of white you see along that center aisle on the Democratic side. So many of the women in the Democratic caucus have not only worn white to mark the issue of reproductive rights, but they have moved themselves in unison towards the center aisle. There's a nationwide photo op that's about to happen, and it's going to be a seminal image.
And Scott, is there anything not similar, but anything that is either from a clothing sartorial perspective or buttons or anything on the Republican side for an issue that they are either gravitating toward or want to bring attention to this evening?
You're going to see a series of pins throughout this chamber. Republicans, some in unison, have synchronized wearing a pin honoring a person named Laken Riley, whose name was on legislation that passed the U.S. House this afternoon. Another marking, another bill over the issue of border security.
And Scott, we have also been covering the protests that were happening outside in protest to the president's handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Do we see any evidence inside the chamber of anyone resembling that kind of protest as well?
Oh, it's a great question, Caitlin. It's been an open-ended question among Democratic staffers and members today. Is somebody in this upper level going to try to disrupt things? We asked that question, and they asked that question because it's something that's happened at several events involving the president on the campaign trail and otherwise in the past few months. I'm also noticing one other thing, if I have the floor here for another moment. A lot of the retiring members of Congress are getting bipartisan send-offs, handshakes. Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi just embraced for a moment. Nancy Pelosi smiling at Mitch McConnell, shaking his hand, and some extended comments. Mitch McConnell, of course, announced he's no longer going to be leader after the end of this Congress. But I'm also seeing many of the retiring House members bidding farewell to people, even though they've got obviously a few months left.
No doubt. And Scott, we referenced a moment ago the security precautions taken here around the State of the Union address. Caitlin and I are now no longer bathed in some of our television atmospheric lights for that very security reason. Security personnel have asked us to turn the lights off, so Caitlin and I are here. I probably look much better without the lights. That's just a general observation.
Supreme Court justices
And
now.
Supreme Court justices arriving, not the full complement of all 9 Supreme Court justices. Scott, I'll let you introduce them as they make their way down the center aisle of the House.
And we expect to see the Chief Justice first, and that's what we get. John Roberts, followed by Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. 6 of 9, which means Amy Coney Barrett, Sam Alito, and Clarence Thomas are not here, but the retired Justice, Anthony Kennedy, walking behind the rest of the group in his robe, and he will sit with his former colleagues.
And Scott, worth pointing out, the justices there, the Supreme Court itself, already made one decision with political implications this campaign year. We'll hear oral arguments in another case later next month.
April 25th, the final day of their term, is when they'll hear the arguments for presidential immunity from Donald Trump. Just staging that argument delays and potentially calls off the Trump January 6th trial before the election.
And this is one of those pregnant moments in the procedures of the State of the Union address. Almost everyone who does need to be in place inside the House chamber is in place inside the House chamber, except, of course, the most important guest of all, the President of the United States. That is coming ever more closely to the United States Capitol, as the pictures on your screen quite clearly indicate. Scott McFarland from inside the House chamber, we thank you.
No problem.
That does it for our coverage tonight.
We want to take you now to CBS News special coverage of President Biden's State of the Union address, hosted by Norah O'Donnell. You are streaming CBS News.
This is a CBS News special report. President Biden's State of the Union address and the Republican response.
Good evening. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington for tonight's State of the Union address. It is a pivotal moment for President Biden, arguably the most important of his 50-year political career, as he hopes to convince Americans to give him 4 more years in office. As we look live inside the House chamber in the U.S. Capitol, the president's challenge tonight is to sell his vision for America and address voters' doubts about him personally and politically, from his age to his agility to handle the immigration crisis and a rebounding economy where many Americans struggle with the price of gas and groceries. Tonight, we are told the president will focus on the stark choice that they face in November. And while he won't mention Donald Trump by name, we are told this speech will in some ways mark the beginning of what promises to be a bruising 8-month presidential campaign. Aides to President Biden say he intends to offer an optimistic vision of the country's progress, what he's calling America's comeback. But it is notable that we've got a new CBS News poll out that describes the state of the country as divided. And as we look inside that chamber, see many of the members talking with one another as we await the president. The new speaker has warned Republicans, his party, to remain respectful and civil. No outbursts, but no doubt there's tension high inside that chamber. I'm joined tonight by the best political team in the business. And let's start off with Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan. And Margaret, we're told the president has just arrived on the Hill. What's at stake for him tonight?
Well, for President Biden, he's about to do something he doesn't often do, which is actually explain to the public his vision for the country. And Nora, we are seeing in our own CBS polling that there's frustration with that. In fact, a majority of those polled by CBS believe that he has less of a vision for the country than Donald Trump does. So the 81-year-old president tonight needs to stand there and show he has the excitement and ability to go through an agenda that he will say is really being blocked by Donald Trump, encouraging the GOP to stop him from surging resources to the border, to stop him from getting weapons to fight Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. And he's going to try to take a victory lap here on the economy, pointing to things like strong job growth. But he will blame the corporations doing that hiring for any of the discomfort people at home may still be feeling. But I think you put your finger on it. This country is divided. You wonder who will receive whatever message he's trying to deliver.
Nancy Cordes, you cover the White House for us as our chief White House correspondent. How did the president prepare, and how aware is his team? This is the largest TV audience he'll probably have this election season.
They are extremely aware, Nora. They say that while the speech won't be overtly political, he's not going to bash Republicans right and left, but they're aware that this is happening within a political season, and they really view the speech as the kickoff to the general election campaign. And so this is a message that they're going to want to take forward over the next several months as he barnstorms the country in ads, via surrogates. He's really laying the foundation for the case that he wants to make for 4 more years to the American public.
We're running a little late this evening as we await the President of the United States, and we see many of the House Democratic women wearing white. What's the message? On reproductive rights, they're sending a message tonight.
You'll also see a number of women in blue, and they say that they're wearing blue to show solidarity with Israeli hostages who are still being held in Gaza.
Barbara Costa is with us as our chief election campaign correspondent. This is the president's night. It is his address to the nation, the State of the Union. And yet Donald Trump will be reacting in real time. What do you think we will be at the end of the night in terms of the clash between the two of them, the selling of their ideas?
Inside President Biden's inner circle, there's a real sense that tonight he has the spotlight. He knows that his rival, the likely Republican nominee, Donald Trump, always seizes the spotlight, generates more headlines. This is Biden's time to try to really take command. Trump will be watching. He's actually going to be posting what he's calling play-by-play on social media. And keep an eye out on the Republican response. Senator Britt of Alabama, she's endorsed Trump. Speaker Johnson's endorsed Trump. This whole party, the GOP, in the image and likeness of Donald Trump ideologically and in political spirit.
Ed O'Keefe, as we look inside the chamber, you've covered Congress too, you've covered the White House, and the president's got to sell his agenda, what he's been doing for the last 3 years, try and do a victory lap, if you will. But at the same time, on the 2 top issues for voters, immigration and the border, he is what we call underwater. 2/3 of Americans disapprove of how he's doing.
Right, and it's telling that in the lead up to this, we've heard about things he wants to do to address inflation, what he might do and say and propose regarding the war in the Middle East. We haven't heard anything about what he's planning to say tonight about immigration and the border. Polling continues to show most Americans disapprove of the way he's handling this. He was on the border last week trying to provide a contrast with former President Trump, likely to push them tonight to approve legislation that would free up billions of dollars for border security and the Border Patrol. And then on the economy, talk about different ways that he wants to help Americans save money, whether it's going after so-called hidden or junk fees from credit card companies and the airlines, new tax breaks, and renewing the child tax credit.
Well, what about that? How much will he blame the House Republicans and Speaker Johnson, who'll be sitting behind him for the first time, for tanking what is the toughest bipartisan bill on immigration in decades? I mean, Democrats were grinding their teeth, and the president was trying to pull them across the line to support this, but it was blocked.
It was.
And the president and those in the White House believe this is because Donald Trump called them up and said, no, I don't want this win.
Very likely that he would call them out directly on that at some point tonight.
And you'll see among some of the Republicans, I just saw a few of them, they're wearing big buttons that say Biden's border crisis. They are trying to run on this as a crisis caused by the president's decision not to use executive authority. But the president has consistently said, including at the border when you were with him, he wants Congress to actually change the laws and Congress to actually surge the resources, and he'll bring it back to that bipartisan bill, which, as you said, was endorsed by conservative groups, including the right-leaning Border Patrol Union.
And what better opportunity to go after a Congress that's done very little substantively, at least in the last year, than right in front of them and turn to the American public and say it's their fault.
This is one of the most scripted nights in American politics, but people close to President Biden say, watch the unscripted moments tonight. Maybe the Republicans shout, maybe they point a finger. Now, you said Speaker Johnson told them to be civil, but it was last year when he had that feisty exchange with congressional Republicans that really set that State of the Union apart from others. And for tonight, I'm really watching as a reporter, what are the unscripted moments? Does President Biden actually take on personally, individually, some of these members sitting in the audience?
Well, one of those unscripted moments we've already seen. The president's late because of how pro-Palestinian protesters who are making clear their objection to the president's embrace of the Israeli prime minister and the ongoing war in Gaza. And that is going to be something you hear him harken back to, and they're trying to get in front of because he needs to consolidate his Democratic base. It is not just Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, progressive Democrats. This is a real worry. You saw it in Minnesota, you saw it in Michigan with those uncommitted voters.
And you can see the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff there discussing as they await the president. Remember, this is not just the House and the Senate. It's members of the cabinet. It's members of the Supreme Court. It's members of the military. There are guests also of the First Lady in the box. So this is one of the biggest events of the year, the president's State of the Union, and that's why it's watched so closely. I want to bring in our chief political analyst, John Dickerson, as we were talking about the issue of civility, the tension inside that chamber. And the speaker, the new speaker, going so far as to warn his own members about decorum, actually consulting this House Sergeant of Arms about whether people, if he bangs the gavel more than once, can he kick somebody out? All of those sorts of things. Do you think it could get rowdy tonight?
Well, who knows the minds of men and women who'd like to raise money with a breakout moment or get attention on social media. And the speaker has some of those in his conference who act out for all of the reasons that inspire behavior like that in politics today. So it could very well be the case based on the excerpts from the president's speech. He's baiting Republicans. I know the White House says he's not going to call them out, but it'll be pretty darn obvious who he's calling out. And when you bait them, it's very likely the president might not mind getting a response. One of the arguments he's trying to make is that Republicans don't know how to run a government and that it's a chaotic party. So he'd like to see that on display, whether that happens or not. We should also remember Speaker Johnson told his group to behave themselves, but it was in an election year that the former Speaker Nancy Pelosi tore up a speech behind Donald Trump. So the acting out has been on both sides in this ceremony. But this isn't just silly symbolism or spectacle. The Capitol is ringed with fences and National Guard troops because of an attack on the Capitol on January 6th. So this is very serious business. And you have many moderates in the audience, senators and members of the House, who used to participate in deal-making and lawmaking that was based on compromise. They're all leaving now. And that's also another symbol of what's happened with politics today.
Right. We should acknowledge the First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, just entered to applause, and everyone's standing to greet her.
A quick note about who's sitting in First Lady Jill Biden's box. UAW President Sean Fain. It's part of an overture to labor by President Biden.
We're getting ready now.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
And there you have it. This is the beginning of the ceremony. We're running at least 10 minutes late.
Nothing, Nora. Nancy, Weege, and I could tell you this is Biden's standard time. 10 minutes late is still early. So, ladies and gentlemen at home, it could be a few more minutes. We're used to this.
Well, there you have the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, who has been very busy dealing with a number of international crises, not only what is going on with the war in Gaza and dealing with Israel and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and trying to get him as well as the leaders of Hamas to agree to a ceasefire, but also trying to get many of these people inside this room to agree to a supplemental bill to fund those wars as well as the border crisis at the southern border.
And Nora, now that we are able to actually see the chamber, it really is a sea of white, as you pointed out, and reproductive rights is going to be a huge focus. Both of the president's speech and within the room, you have IVF patients who have been invited by Democrats. You have fertility doctors who have been invited. Sitting with the First Lady, women who have tried to get abortions because of non-viable pregnancies, but were told they could not do so in their state. So the president trying to make a larger case that individual freedoms have been rolled back since Roe v. Wade was overturned 2 years ago.
And tonight he will say that if he is reelected, he will reinstate Roe versus Wade.
He will try to. Right.
Yes.
It will be
Democratic Congress that he needs the Senate and the
one of several things he will promise to do, but will actually be quite difficult to get done in reality.
And it is part of the Republican response, this choice of Katie Britt from the state of Alabama, a state that just today signed into law protections for IVF within 2 weeks of that state ruling that just really caused such a political backlash.
And as we await President Biden inside the House chamber, our own Scott McFarland is there for us to give us a bird's eye view and tell us what you're seeing.
Well, the president's about to enter a gridlocked, some would say dysfunctional Congress that has struggled, Nora, to just do the basic things government's supposed to do. You know, keep the lights on, keep the offices open. There's been some jockeying for seats along that center aisle. I saw people lining up there, members of Congress, as early as 2 p.m. to secure that seat and get that moment to shake hands with President Biden. Among those on the Republican side, though, and I'll note this because she's been inching her way closer and closer, is perhaps his most vitriolic critic, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. And we spotted just a short while ago also on the floor a former member of Congress. His name might ring a bell, Nora. George Santos. He still has floor privileges.
Scott, thank you for that. Many people, of course, know that the top issues are immigration and the economy. And the economy has rebounded in many ways, yet people aren't feeling it. I want to bring in Joe Linkett, who's our CBS News senior business and technology correspondent. What do the numbers tell us about the state of the economy and people's perception about the economy?
Nora, you're going to hear it tonight from President Biden. He's going to trumpet what he calls his big wins. 15 million jobs added, unemployment below 4% for more than 2 years. That's something we haven't seen since the 1960s. Small businesses, one of the guests of the president is a small business owner. Those openings have been very strong. But the reality of the situation is the devil is in the details in terms of budget, personal budgets. We're talking about auto insurance going up. We're talking about food prices going up. Rent continues to skyrocket. So there's this massive disconnect. In fact, in our CBS News polling, we have seen this come into play. President Trump's economy is remembered more fondly than the current economy under President Biden, even though the numbers overall are stronger. But what's really hurting right now is mortgage rates. Things are really expensive. Prices continue to climb. We're not seeing deflation. We're just seeing a cooling off of inflation. So we expect to hear the president today really hammer home on those wins, but also admit that prices are still too high in some areas.
I want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett. And, you know, Major, we would be remiss not to mention where we were just a little over 3 years ago in the Capitol, January 6th, and what happened there.
Yep. We would, Nora, and the security posture here reflects an anxiety that endures from January 6, 2021. Outside the Capitol, ringing the entire Capitol complex, 8 feet of iron fence, all black, and National Guard personnel up Independence Avenue, Constitution Avenue, in front of the Supreme Court, basically surrounding, not man by man, person by person, foot by foot, but their presence is highly noticeable here. And that's the reflection not only of what happened on January 6, 2021, but something that persists. And what is that? The threat environment around all members of Congress. Threats to senators, members of Congress, text messages, emails, phone calls have been increasing steadily since 2021. In this divided nation, the security posture here reflects that reality. Nora, I've been covering State of the Union addresses since the early 90s. They're always a high security event. That's true. Security was tightened after 9/11, inevitably. But this new layer of security represents something different, which is a sense that members of Congress have that they're under threat from fellow Americans. That's a new reality. It's reflected in the posture here tonight.
Major Garrett, thank you. And given the high security at a State of the Union, let's now listen in as
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And there you have it at 9:16, the House Sergeant at Arms, William McFarland, announcing the president's arrival into the House chamber, where he will no doubt take his time to do a little grip and grin with everybody there. As has been noted, he spent 36 years in the United States Senate. He has had a 50-year political career, so he knows many of these members quite well.
And he was taking photos with his escort committee on their way. And by the way, we watched this for the outfits, for who's in the room, who's not. We've now been told by the White House it's the Education Secretary, Miguel Cardona, who's staying away tonight as a designated survivor, to the point about security.
What a journey for President Joe Biden. First elected to the Senate in 1972. For him, this is coming home in a sense, a place where he forged his political career, has so many of his closest personal friends and some foes. Politically, Matt Gaetz, the Florida congressman and Trump ally, was right up there as the president entered the chamber.
Think about how long he's been at this. 41 years ago this year, he gave the response to Ronald Reagan as a 40-year-old senator from Delaware. Now, 41 years later, here he is as President of the United States again.
And he really rose to prominence as one of the lions of the Senate who were known for cutting deals and working across the aisle at a time when that was, sort of the highest honor you could have. It's become much more difficult today, but he's going to make the case in this speech, I'm told, that he has worked to compromise over the last several years, and he's willing to do it again.
The State of the Unions have sometimes become a laundry list of policy ideas, but Weijia Jiang is with us as well. And Weijia, tonight, how the president delivers his speech is almost as important as what's in this speech, correct?
Absolutely, Nora, and that's because his physical performance tonight is on display. It is critical as he tries to convince the American public that he has the stamina and the mental fitness to serve as president, especially because we already know Republicans have baked that into their response. So he has to answer in his delivery tonight whether it's a question that continues to loom over him, whether at age 81 years old, he is too old to serve as commander-in-chief. In recent weeks, we saw a blistering special counsel report that detailed his lagging memory. We have seen him multiple times confuse and misspeak about the names of places and people, and so they have addressed this before and said, look, everybody stumbles, but he has to be on point tonight. And his advisors tell us that's exactly what you will see. They have set really high expectations, Nora. They say that you're going to see a very energetic president who is in, quote, fighting form. And he might make a couple self-deprecating jokes about his age, which we have seen him do in recent days. But one source tells me that he is so fired up, he is so well prepared and rehearsed that we won't even remember that his age is an issue. Nora?
Weijia Jiang, thank you. One of the also topics that we're told the president is going to address tonight is the issue of democracy and protecting democracy in America, which seems like an odd thing that you would have to actually talk about that. But later this week, tomorrow, his opponent in this campaign, Donald Trump, is meeting with Viktor Orban, in Mar-a-Lago, the leader of Hungary, who is considered a dictator.
Behind the scenes, President Biden is telling his advisors the stakes are high, not just red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat. For President Biden, this is about countering what he sees as the rising forces of nationalism here at home with Donald Trump and abroad in Hungary with Orban and other figures who have similar views worldwide. And this is really about him reasserting, as Margaret so deeply reported and others, his position on Ukraine, about the United States having a presence in the world. But I will just say something quick on that's fun. You always think about our Constitution on nights like tonight. It says from time to time the president will deliver a State of the Union, but it's not necessary. And I always think back to 1801 when President Thomas Jefferson decided to send in a letter and not address Congress. It's not necessary to give this big speech, but most presidents say, I'll do it.
Margaret, address those foreign policy issues that the president will address tonight.
Well, Nora, the Prime Minister of Sweden is sitting in the First Lady's box, and that is for a reason. That is one of President Biden's accomplishments here, he would say, is getting Sweden and Finland to join NATO. Really, that was Vladimir Putin's accomplishment when he invaded Ukraine and absolutely terrified the rest of Europe. But to your point about Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary has undermined the judiciary, the free press. He has really stood in the way, in many ways, of aid to Ukraine at the EU and at NATO. He is a NATO member, but to actually get that aid through, the world leaders had to conspire to have him outside the room when votes were taken. That is who this man is, and he has talked about not wanting races to be mixed in his country. So that question of, okay, he's a NATO member, he's a world leader, meet with him, but what's the strategy? Why do you need to sit with this particular person? What is the message being sent?
So why is Trump doing that?
They have not explained it. They have not explained it, and it just goes back to the right-wing nationalist embrace. He has spoken at conservative conferences. Viktor Orban has. Other conservative leaders from El Salvador and elsewhere have started to appear at some of these conservative gatherings. So that old adage of foreign policy doesn't matter in politics is gone. Listen to Trump's speech. He talks about it a lot.
And you think about President Biden's presidency, it reminds me in a sense of Richard Nixon's, not in terms of Watergate or anything like that, but the focus on foreign policy.
And there you have President Biden greeting Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Can I suggest that we are being taken a little bit for a ride here by a president who's eager to show the country that he's boisterous, that he's up to the task? What have we just watched him do over the last few minutes? Talk to Democrats, Republicans, shake their hands, take photos, confronted Marjorie Taylor Greene, or she confronted him. He took it. They talked briefly. He's working through himself through the room, suggested, what are you worried about me being old? Here I am talking to all these people on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, by our count, maybe a 6-minute walk or more, where Democratic members have engaged in what is like a campaign-type chant, 4 more years. I can't recall a time like that when the president was walking in. It's usually much more ceremonial. This feels a little bit more like a campaign event. And again, I wonder how that will change the tone of things when the president makes some of his policy remarks tonight.
There's just so much on the line, and the idea is that the president is getting so much attention, taking selfies with members of Congress, and the idea is to make himself accessible, and the strategy here is to focus and think about some of those domestic issues that so many people are thinking about, including the economy. How much people are paying for things. That's what you're going to hear from the president tonight, and you can imagine what he might be talking with these members of Congress. So many of these Congress people are facing taxpayers at home who are worried that too much money is outflowing out into Ukraine, into Israel, and issues are not being taken care of here at home, including inflation and shoring up the economy.
And the timing of this speech really gives him a big opportunity, coming just 2 days after Super Tuesday, 1 day after Nikki Haley dropped out of the Republican race. There are some 40% of her voters who told exit pollsters that they're not sold on voting for Donald Trump in the fall. And so the Biden team is making a very overt overture to those voters. I think you'll hear it tonight. I think you'll hear him lay out policies that they think will appeal to those independent or moderate voters on the right that they think are potentially gettable.
And now the President of the United States handing the State of the Union, his remarks there. Of course, that's Speaker Mike Johnson. This is his first night at the podium there. He has warned and counseled, I guess you could say, members of his conference to be civil. And we will see how they react tonight.
Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "I'll do what I want."
And she had a baseball cap on in the House chamber with a "Make America Great." So she always does what she wants to do, and she'll be campaigning also with President Trump in the next coming days.
One fun fact: Vice President Harris at this State of the Union has sat next to a different Speaker of the House every year. Nancy Pelosi, then Kevin McCarthy, who of course now has been ousted, Mike Johnson tonight. Sign again of the instability in Congress, perhaps.
Well, that's tell me something I don't know. That's a good one, Ed. Thank you. I always like to learn something new.
I try.
Yeah. Let's listen in now to the president.
Good evening. If I were smart, I'd go home now. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans, in January 1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation, and he said, "I address you at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this was no ordinary time. Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not. But Ukraine can stop Putin. Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine and provide the weapons that needs to defend itself. That is all. That is all Ukraine is asking. They're not asking for American soldiers. In fact, there are no American soldiers at war in Ukraine, and I'm determined to keep it that way. But now, assistance to Ukraine is being blocked by those who want to walk away from our world leadership. It wasn't long ago when a Republican president named Ronald Reagan thundered, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now, my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." That's a quote. A former president actually said that, bowing down to a Russian leader. I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable. America is a founding member of NATO, the military alliance of democratic nations created after World War II to prevent war and keep the peace. And today, we've made NATO stronger than ever. We welcomed Finland to the alliance last year. And just this morning, Sweden officially joined, and their minister is here tonight. Can they stand up? Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And they know how to fight. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to NATO, the strongest military alliance the world has ever seen. I say this to Congress, we have to stand up to Putin. Send me a bipartisan national security bill. History is literally watching. History is watching. If the United States walks away, it will put Ukraine at risk. Europe is at risk. The free world will be at risk, emboldening others to do what they wish to do us harm. My message to President Putin, who I've known for a long time, is simple. We will not walk away. We will not bow down. I will not bow down. In a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching. Just like history watched 3 years ago on January 6th, when insurrectionists stormed this very Capitol and placed a dagger to the throat of American democracy. Many of you were here on that darkest of days. We all saw with our own eyes the insurrectionists were not patriots. They'd come to stop the peaceful transfer of power, to overturn the will of the people. January 6th lies about the 2020 election and the plots to steal the election posed a gravest threat to U.S. democracy since the Civil War. But they failed. America stood. America stood strong, and democracy prevailed. We must be honest. The threat to democracy must be defended. My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th. I will not do that. This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win. As I've done ever since being elected to office, I ask all of you without regard to party to join together and defend democracy. Remember your oath of office is defending against all threats, foreign and domestic. Respect free and fair elections, restore trust in our institutions, and make clear political violence has absolutely no place in America, zero place. Again, it's not hyperbole to suggest history is watching. We're watching. Your children and grandchildren will read about this day and what we do. History is watching another assault on freedom. Joining us tonight is Latoya Beasley, a social worker from Birmingham, Alabama. 14 months ago, she and her husband welcomed a baby girl thanks to the miracle of IVF. She scheduled treatments to have that second child, but the Alabama Supreme Court shut down IVF treatments across the state, unleashed by a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. She was told her dream would have to wait. What her family had got through should never have happened. Unless Congress acts, it could happen again. So tonight, let's stand up for families like hers. To my friends across the aisle, don't keep this waiting any longer. Guarantee the right to AVF. Guarantee it nationwide. Like most Americans, I believe Roe v. Wade got it right. I thank Vice President Harris for being an incredible leader, defending reproductive freedom, and so much more. Thank you. My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned. He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it. Look at the chaos that has resulted. Joining us tonight is Kate Cox, a wife and mother from Dallas. She's become pregnant again and had a fetus of a fatal condition. Her doctor told Kate that her own life and her ability to have children in the future were at risk if she didn't act. Because Texas law banned her ability to act, Kate and her husband had to leave the state to get what she needed. What her family got through should have never happened as well, but it's happening in too many others. There are state laws banning the freedom to choose, criminalizing doctors, forcing survivors of rape and incest to leave their states to get the treatment they need. Many of you in this chamber and my predecessor are promising to pass a national ban on reproductive freedom. My God, what freedom else would you take away? Look, it's a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court majority wrote the following, and with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that. Clearly, those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot. We won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024. If you, the American people, Send me a Congress that supports the right to choose. I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again. Folks, America cannot go back. I'm here tonight to show what I believe is the way forward, because I know how far we come. 4 years ago next week, before I came to office, the country was hit by the worst pandemic and the worst economic crisis in a century. Remember the fear, record losses? Remember the spikes in crime and the murder rate, raging virus that took more than 1 million American lives, of loved ones, millions left behind? A mental health crisis of isolation and loneliness. A president, my predecessor, failed the most basic presidential duty that he owes to American people, the duty to care. I think that's unforgivable. I came to office determined to get us through one of the toughest periods in the nation's history. We have. It doesn't make news in 1,000 cities and towns. The American people are writing the greatest comeback story never told. So let's tell the story here. Tell it here and now. America's comeback is building the future of American possibilities, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down, investing in all America, in all Americans, to make sure everyone has a fair shot, and we leave no one behind. The pandemic no longer controls our lives. The vaccines that saved us from COVID are now being used to beat cancer, turning setback into comeback. That's what America does. That's what America does. Folks, my inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world. 15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record, a record. Unemployment at 50-year lows. A record 16 million Americans are starting small businesses, and each one is a literal act of hope. With historic job growth and small business growth for Black and Hispanics and Asian Americans, 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America and counting. Where is it written we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? We are, and we will. More people have health insurance today. More people have health insurance today than ever before. The racial wealth gap is as small as it's been in 20 years. Wages keep going up. Inflation keeps coming down. Inflation has dropped from 9% to 3%, the lowest in the world, and tending lower. The landing is and will be soft. And now, instead of importing foreign products and exporting American jobs, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Right here in America, where they belong. And it takes time, but the American people are beginning to feel it. Consumer studies show consumer confidence is soaring. Buy America has been the law of the land since the 1930s. Past administrations, including my predecessor, including some Democrats as well in the past, failed to buy American. Not anymore. On my watch, federal projects that you fund, like helping build American roads, bridges, and highways, will be made with American products and built by American workers. Creating good-paying American jobs. And thanks to our CHIPS and Science Act, the United States is investing more in research and development than ever before. During the pandemic, a shortage of semiconductors, chips, that drove up the price of everything from cell phones to automobiles. And by the way, we invented those chips right here in America. Well, instead of having to import them, private companies are now investing billions of dollars to build new chip factories here in America, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Many of those jobs paying $100,000 a year and don't require a college degree. In fact, my policies have attracted $650 billion in private sector investment in clean energy, advanced manufacturing, creating tens of thousands of jobs here in America. And thanks to our bipartisan infrastructure law, 46,000 new projects have been announced all across your communities. And by the way, I noticed some of you strongly voted against it, or they're cheering on that money coming in. I like it. I'm with you. I'm with you. If any of you don't want that money in your district, just let me know. Modernizing our roads and bridges, ports and airports, public transit systems. Removing poisonous lead pipes so every child can drink clean water without risk of brain damage. Providing affordable high-speed internet for every American, no matter where you live, urban, suburban, or rural communities, in red states and blue states. Record investments in tribal communities. Because of my investment in family farms, because I invested in family farms led by my Secretary of Agriculture, who knows more about this than anybody I know, we're better able to stay in the family for those farms and their children and grandchildren won't have to leave home to make a living. It's transformative. The great comeback story is Belvidere, Illinois, home to an auto plant for nearly 60 years. Before I came to office, the plant was on its way to shutting down. Thousands of workers feared for their livelihoods. Hope was fading. Then I was elected to office, and we raised the Belvidere repeatedly with auto companies, knowing unions would make all the difference. The UAW worked like hell to keep the plant open and get these jobs back, and together we succeeded. Instead of auto factories shutting down, auto factories reopening, and new state-of-the-art battery factories being built to power those cars there at the same. The folks at Belvidere, I say, instead of your town being left behind, your community is moving forward again. Because instead of watching auto jobs of the future go overseas, 4,000 union jobs with higher wages are building the future in Belvidere right here in America. Here tonight is UAW President Shawn Fain, a great friend and a great labor leader. Shawn, where are you? Stand up. And Dawn Sims, a third-generation worker, UAW worker at Belvidere. Shawn, I was proud to be the first president to stand on the picket line, and today, Dawn has a good job in her hometown, providing stability for her family and pride and dignity as well. Showing once again, Wall Street didn't build America. They're not bad guys. They didn't build it, though. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. I say to the American people, when America gets knocked down, we get back up. We keep going. That's America. That's you, the American people. It's because of you America's coming back. It's because of you our future is brighter. It's because of you that tonight we can proudly say the state of our union is strong and getting stronger. Tonight, I want to talk about the future of possibilities that we can build together. A future where the days of trickle-down economics are over and the wealthy and the biggest corporations no longer get all the tax breaks. And by the way, I understand corporations. I come from a state that has more corporations invested than every one of your states in the United States combined. And I represented it for 36 years. I'm not anti-corporation, but I grew up in a home where trickle-down economics didn't put much on my dad's kitchen table. That's why I determined to turn things around so middle class does well. When they do well, the poor go way up and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. And there's more to do to make sure you're feeling the benefits of all we're doing. Americans pay more for prescription drugs than anywhere in the world. It's wrong, and I'm ending it. With the law that I proposed and signed, not one of you Republican buddies voted for it, we finally beat Big Pharma. Instead of paying $400 a month or thereabouts for insulin with diabetes, and it only costs $10 to make, they only get paid $35 a month now and still make a healthy profit. And I want to, but what to do next? I want to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for every American who needs it. Everyone. For years, people have talked about it, but finally we got it done and gave Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices on prescription drugs, just like the VA is able to do for veterans. That's not just saving seniors money, it's saving taxpayers money. We cut the federal deficit by $160 billion. Because Medicare will no longer have to pay those exorbitant prices to Big Pharma. This year, Medicare is negotiating lower prices for some of the costliest drugs on the market to treat everything from heart disease to arthritis. It's now time to go further and give Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices for 500 different drugs over the next decade. They're making a lot of money, guys. And they'll still be extremely profitable. Will not only save lives, it will save taxpayers another $200 billion. Starting next year, the same law caps total prescription drug costs for seniors on Medicare at $2,000 a year, even for expensive cancer drugs that cost $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. Now I want to cap prescription drug costs at $2,000 a year for everyone. Folks, I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but if you want to get an Air Force One and fly to Toronto, Berlin, Moscow, well, even Moscow, probably. And bring your prescription with you, and I promise you I'll get it for you for 40% the cost you're paying now. Same company, same drug, same place. Folks, the Affordable Care Act, the old Obamacare, it's still a very big deal. Over 100 million of you can no longer be denied health insurance because of pre-existing condition. But my predecessor and many in this chamber want to take this prescription drug away by repealing the Affordable Care Act. I'm not going to let that happen. We stopped you 50 times before, and we'll stop you again. In fact, I'm not only protecting it, I'm expanding it. They enacted tax credits of $800 per person per year, reduce health care costs for millions of working families. That tax credit expires next year. I want to make that savings permanent. To state the obvious, women are more than half our population, but research on women's health has always been underfunded. That's why we're launching the first ever White House initiative on women's health research, led by Jill, doing an incredible job as First Lady. We'll pass my plan for $12 billion to transfer women's health research and benefit millions of lives all across America. I know the cost of housing is so important to you. If inflation keeps coming down, mortgage rates will come down as well, and the Fed acknowledges that. But I'm not waiting. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgages when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space. Just for 2 years. And my administration is also eliminating title insurance on federally backed mortgages. When you refinance your home, you can save $1,000 or more as a consequence. For millions of renters, we're cracking down on big landlords who use antitrust law, who break antitrust laws by price fixing and driving up rents. We've cut red tape so builders can get federally financing, which is already helping build a record 1.7 million new housing units nationwide. Now pass and build and renovate 2 million affordable homes and bring those rents down. To remain the strongest economy in the world, we need to have the best education system in the world. And I suspect all of you, want to give every child, a good start by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. You know, I think I pointed out last year, that children coming from broken homes where there's no books, they're not read to, not spoken to very often, start school, kindergarten, or first grade, having heard 1 million fewer words spoken. Well, studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school, go on to earn a 2- and 4-year degree, no matter what their background is. I met a year and a half ago with the leaders of the Business Roundtable. They were mad that they were angry, they were discussing why I wanted to spend money on education. I pointed out to them, as vice president, I met with over 182 of those folks. Don't hold me to the exact number. And I asked them what they need most, the CEOs. And you've had the same experience on both sides of the aisle. They say a better educated workforce, right? So I looked at them, and I say, I come from Delaware. DuPont used to be the 8th largest corporation in the world. And every new enterprise they bought, they educated the workforce to that enterprise. But none of you do that anymore. Why are you angry with me providing you the opportunity for the best educated workforce in the world? And they all looked at me and said, I think you're right. I want to expand high-quality tutoring and summer learning to see that every child learns to read by 3rd grade. I'm also connecting local businesses and high schools so students get hands-on experience and a path to a good-paying job, whether or not they go to college. And I want to make sure that college is more affordable. Let's continue increasing the Pell Grants to working and middle-class families and increase record investments in HBCUs and minority-serving institutions, including Hispanic institutions. When I was told I couldn't universally just change the way in which we dealt with student loans, I fixed 2 student loan programs that already existed to reduce the burden of student debt for nearly 4 million Americans, including nurses, firefighters, and others in public service. Like Keenan Jones, a public educator from Minnesota, who's here with us tonight. Keenan, where are you? Keenan, thank you. He's educated hundreds of students so they can go to college. Now he's able to help, after debt forgiveness, get his own daughter to college. And folks, look, such relief is good for the economy because folks are now able to buy a home, start a business, start a family. While we're at it, I want to give public school teachers a raise. And by the way, the first couple of years, we cut the deficit. Now, let me speak to the question of fundamental fairness for all Americans. I've been delivering real results in fiscally responsible ways. We've already cut the federal deficit. We've already cut the federal deficit over $1 trillion. I signed the bipartisan deal to cut another $1 trillion in the next decade. It's my goal to cut the federal deficit another $3 trillion by making big corporations and very wealthy finally beginning to pay their fair share. Look, I'm a capitalist. If you want to make or can make $1 million or millions of bucks, that's great. Just pay your fair share in taxes. A fair tax code is how we invest things to make this country great. Healthcare, education, defense, and so much more. But here's the deal. The last administration enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefit the top 1%, the very wealthy and the biggest corporations, and exploded the federal deficit. They added more to the national debt than any presidential term in American history. Check the numbers. Folks at home, does anybody really think the tax code is fair? Do you really think the wealthy and big corporations need another $2 trillion tax break? I sure don't. I'm going to keep fighting like hell to make it fair. Under my plan, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in federal taxes. Nobody, not one penny. And they haven't yet. In fact, the child tax credit I passed during the pandemic cut taxes for millions of working families and cut child poverty in half. Restore that child tax credit. No child should go hungry in this country. The way to make the tax code fair is to make big corporations and the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Remember in 2020, 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion and paid zero in federal income tax. Zero. Not anymore. Thanks to the law I wrote and we signed, big companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. But that's still less than working people pay in federal taxes. It's time to raise corporate minimum tax to at least 21%. So every big corporation finally begins to pay their fair share. I also want to end tax breaks for big pharma, big oil, private jets, massive executive pay when it's only supposed to be $1 million that could be deducted. They can pay them $20 million if they want, but deduct $1 million. End it now. You know, there are 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what the average federal tax is for those billionaires? No. They're making great sacrifices, 8.2%. That's far less than the vast majority of Americans pay. No billionaire should pay a lower federal tax rate than a teacher, a sanitation worker, or a nurse. I propose a minimum tax for billionaires of 25%, just 25%. You know what that would raise? That would raise $500 billion over the next 10 years. And imagine what that could do for America. Imagine a future with affordable child care. Millions of families can get what they need to go to work to help grow the economy. Imagine a future with paid leave, because no one should have to choose between working and taking care of their sick family member. Imagine the future of home care and elder care, and people living with disabilities, so they can stay in their homes and family caregivers can finally get the pay they deserve. Tonight, let's all agree once again to stand up for seniors. Many of my friends on the other side of the aisle want to put Social Security on the chopping block. If anyone here tries to cut Social Security, Medicare, or raise the retirement age, I will stop you. The working people who built this country pay more into Social Security than millionaires and billionaires do. It's not fair. We have two ways to go. Republicans can cut Social Security and give more tax breaks to the wealthy. That's the proposal. Oh no, you guys don't want another $2 trillion tax cut? I kind of thought that's what your plan was. Well, that's good to hear. You're not going to cut another $2 trillion for the super wealthy. That's good to hear. I'll protect and strengthen Social Security and make the wealthy pay their fair share. Look, too many corporations raise prices to pad their profits, charging more and more for less and less. That's why we're cracking down on corporations that engage in price gouging and deceptive pricing, from food to health care to housing. In fact, the snack companies think you won't notice if they change the size of the bag and put a hell of a lot fewer, same size bag, put fewer chips in it. No, I'm not joking. It's called shrinkflation. Pass Bobby Casey's bill and stop this. I really mean it. You probably all saw that commercial on Snickers bars. You get charged the same amount, and you got about, I don't know, 10% fewer Snickers in it. Look, I'm also getting rid of junk fees, those hidden fees at the end of your bill that are there without your knowledge. My administration announced we're cutting credit card late fees from $32 to $8. Banks and credit card companies are allowed to charge what it costs them to instigate the collection. And that's more a hell of a lot like $8 and 30-some dollars. They don't like it. The credit card companies don't like it. But I'm saving American families $20 billion a year with all the junk fees I'm eliminating. Folks at home, that's why the banks are so mad. It's $20 billion in profit. I'm not stopping there. My administration has proposed rules to make cable, travel, utilities, and online ticket sellers tell you the total price up front, so there are no surprises. It matters. It matters. And so does this. In November, my team began serious negotiation with a bipartisan group of senators. The result was a bipartisan bill with the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, you don't like that bill, huh? That conservatives got together and said it was a good bill? I'll be darned. That's amazing. That bipartisan bill would hire 1,500 more security agents and officers, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backload of 2 million cases, 4,300 more asylum officers, and new policies so they can resolve cases in 6 months instead of 6 years now. What are you against? 100 more high-tech drug detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop vehicles smuggling fentanyl into America. That's killing thousands of children. This bill would save lives and bring order to the border. It will also give me and any new president new emergency authority to temporarily shut down the border when the number of migrants at the border is overwhelming. The Border Patrol Union has endorsed this bill. The Federal Chamber of Commerce is, yeah. You're saying low. Look at the facts. I know you know how to read. I believe that given the opportunity for a majority in the House and Senate would endorse the bill as well, a majority right now. But unfortunately, politics has derailed this bill so far. I'm told my predecessor called members of Congress in the Senate to demand they block the bill. He feels political win, he viewed it as a political win for me and a political loser for him. It's not about him, it's not about me. I'd be a winner, not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand. But look, if we change the dynamic at the border, people pay these smugglers $8,000 to get across the border because they know if they get by and let into the country, it's 6 to 8 years before they have a hearing. And it's worth taking the chance of the $8,000. But if it's only 6 weeks, the idea is it's highly unlikely that people will pay that money and come all that way knowing that they'll be able to be kicked out quickly. Folks, I would respectfully suggest my Republican friends owe it to the American people, get this bill done. We need to act now. And if my predecessor is watching, instead of paying politics and pressuring members of Congress to block the bill, join me in telling the Congress to pass it. We can do it together. But that's what here's what he will not do. I will not demonize immigrants saying they are poison in the blood of our country. I will not separate families. I will not ban people because of their faith. Unlike my predecessor on my first day in office, I introduced a comprehensive bill to fix our immigration system. Take a look at it. It has all these and more. Secure the border. Provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, and so much more. But unlike my predecessor, I know who we are as Americans. We're the only nation in the world with a heart and soul that draws from old and new. Home to Native Americans, whose ancestors have been here for thousands of years. Home to people of from every place on earth. They came freely. Some came in chains. Some came when famine struck, like my ancestral family in Ireland. Some to flee persecution, to chase dreams that are impossible anywhere but here in America. That's America. And we all come from somewhere, but we're all Americans. Look, folks, we have a simple choice. We can fight about fixing the border, or we can fix it. and ready to fix it. Send me the border bill now. A transformational moment in history happened 59 years ago today in Selma, Alabama. Hundreds of foot soldiers for justice marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, named after the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, to claim their fundamental right to vote. They were beaten, they were bloody, and left for dead. Our late friend and former colleague, John Lewis, was on that march. We miss him. Joining us tonight are other marchers, both in the gallery and on the floor, including Betty Mae Fikes, known as the voice of Selma. The daughter of gospel singers and preachers, she sang songs of prayer and protest on that bloody Sunday to help shake the nation's conscience. 5 months later, the Voting Rights Act passed and was signed into law. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But 59 years later, there are forces taking us back in time. Voter suppression, election subversion, unlimited dark money, extreme gerrymandering. John Lewis is a great friend to many of us here, but if you truly want to honor him and all the heroes who marched with him, then it's time to do more than talk. Pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And stop denying another core value of America, our diversity across American life. Banning books, it's wrong. Instead of erasing history, let's make history. I want to protect fundamental rights. Pass the Equality Act. And my message to transgender Americans, I have your back. Pass the PRO Act for workers' rights. Raise the federal minimum wage, because every worker has a right to a decent living more than $7 an hour. We're also making history by confronting the climate crisis, not denying it. I don't think any of you think there's no longer a climate crisis. At least I hope you don't. I'm taking the most significant action ever on climate in the history of the world. I'm cutting our carbon emissions in half by 2030, creating tens of thousands of clean energy jobs, like the IBEW work is building and installing 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Conserving 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030. And taking action on environmental justice, fence line communities smothered by the legacy of pollution. And patterned after the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, I launched the Climate Corps to put 20,000 young people to work in the forefront of our clean energy future. I'll triple that number in a decade. To state the obvious, all Americans deserve the freedom to be safe. And America is safer today than when I took office. The year before I took office, murder rates went up 30%. 30% they went up. The biggest increase in history. It was then, through my American Rescue Plan, which every American voted against, I might add, we made the largest investment in public safety ever. Last year, the murder rate saw the sharpest decrease in history. Violent crime fell to one of its lowest levels in more than 50 years. But we have more to do. We have to help cities invest in more community police officers, more mental health workers, more community violence intervention. Give communities the tool to crack down on gun crime, retail crime, and carjacking. Keep building trust as they've been doing by taking executive action on police reform and calling for it to be the law of the land. Directing my cabinet to review the federal classification of marijuana and expunging thousands of convictions for the mere possession, because no one should be jailed for simply using or have it on their record. Take on crimes of domestic violence. I'm ramping up the federal enforcement of the Violence Against Women Act that I proudly wrote when I was a senator, so we can finally end the scourge against women in America. There are other kinds of violence I want to stop. With us tonight is Jasmine, whose 9-year-old sister Jackie was murdered with 21 classmates and teachers in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Very soon after that happened, Jill and I went to Uvalde for a couple of days. We spent hours and hours with each of the families. We heard their message, so everyone in this room, in this chamber, could hear the same message. The constant refrain, and I was there for hours meeting with every family. They said, do something. Do something. Well, I did do something by establishing the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the White House, that the Vice President is leading the charge. Thank you for doing it. Meanwhile, my predecessor told the NRA he's proud he did nothing on guns when he was president. Oh. After another shooting in Iowa recently, he said, when asked what to do about it, he said, just get over it. There's his quote, just get over it. I say, stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. I'm proud we beat the NRA when I signed the most significant gun safety law in nearly 30 years because of this Congress. We now must beat the NRA again. I'm demanding a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Pass universal background checks. None of this. I taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. None of this violates the Second Amendment or vilifies responsible gun owners. You know, as we manage challenges at home, we're also managing crises abroad, including in the Middle East. I know the last 5 months have been gut-wrenching for so many people, for the Israeli people, for the Palestinian people, and so many here in America. This crisis began on October 7th with a massacre by a terrorist group called Hamas, as you all know. 1,200 innocent people, women and girls, men and boys, slaughtered after enduring sexual violence. The deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and 250 hostages taken. Here in this chamber tonight are families whose loved ones are still being held by Hamas. I pledge to all the families that we will not rest until we bring every one of your loved ones home. We also We will also work around the clock to bring home Evan and Paul, Americans being unjustly detained by the Russians and others around the world. Israel has the right to go after Hamas. Hamas ended this conflict by releasing hostages, laying down arms, could end it by releasing the hostages, laying down arms, and surrendering those responsible for October 7th. But Israel has Israel has an added burden because Hamas hides and operates among the civilian population like cowards, under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like. Israel also has a fundamental responsibility, though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war has taken a greater toll on innocent civilians than all previous wars in Gaza combined. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are not Hamas. Thousands and thousands of innocents, women and children, girls and boys, also orphaned. Nearly 2 million more Palestinians under bombardment or displacement. Homes destroyed, neighborhoods in rubble, cities in ruin. Families without food, water, medicine. It's heartbreaking. I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released, to get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. And they're announcing they're going to have a crossing in northern Gaza. To the leadership of Israel, I say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time. And I say this as a lifelong supporter of Israel. My entire career, no one has a stronger record with Israel than I do. I challenge any of you here. I'm the only American president of Israel in wartime. But there is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and democracy. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace with peace and dignity. And there's no other path that guarantees peace between Israel and all of its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, with whom I'm talking. Creating stability in the Middle East also means containing the threat posed by Iran. That's why I built a coalition of more than a dozen countries to defend international shipping and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. I've ordered strikes to degrade the Houthi capability and defend U.S. forces in the region. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not hesitate to direct further measures to protect our people and our military personnel. For years, I've heard many of my Republican and Democratic friends say that China is on the rise and America's falling behind. They've got it backwards. I've been saying it for over 4 years, even when I wasn't president. America's rising. We have the best economy in the world. And since I've come to office, our GDP is up, our trade deficit with China is down to the lowest point in over a decade. And we're standing up against China's unfair economic practices. We're standing up for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. I've revitalized our partnership and alliance in the Pacific. India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Pacific Islands. I've made sure that the most advanced American technologies can't be used in China, not allowing to trade them there. Frankly, for all this tough talk on China, it never occurred to my predecessor to do any of that. I want competition with China, not conflict. And we're in a stronger position to win the conflict of the 21st century against China than anyone else, for that matter, than any time as well. Here at home, I've signed over 400 bipartisan bills, but there's more to pass my unity agenda. Strengthen penalties on fentanyl trafficking, You don't want to do that, huh? Pass bipartisan privacy legislation to protect our children online. Harness the promise of AI to protect us from peril. Ban AI voice impersonations and more. And keep our truly sacred obligation to train and equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't. That's why the song Support and Help of Dennis and the VA, I signed the PACT Act. One of the most significant laws ever, helping millions of veterans exposed to toxins who now are battling more than 100 different cancers. Many of them don't come home, but we owe them and their families support. We owe it to ourselves to keep supporting our new health research agency called ARPA-H, and remind us that we can do big things like end cancer as we know it, and we will. Let me close with this. Yay. I know you don't want to hear any more, Lindsay, but I got to say a few more things. I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever. I know the American story. Again and again, I've seen the contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of our nation, between those who want to pull America back to the past and those who want to move America into the future. My lifetime has taught me to embrace freedom and democracy, a future based on core values that have defined America: honesty, decency, dignity, equality, to respect everyone, to give everyone a fair shot, to give hate no safe harbor. Now, other people my age see it differently. The American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution, that's not me. I was born amid World War II, when America stood for the freedom of the world. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, among working-class people who built this country. I watched in horror as two of my heroes, like many of you did, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy, were assassinated. And their legacies inspired me to pursue a career in service. I left the law firm and became a public defender because my city of Wilmington was the only city in America occupied by the National Guard after Dr. King was assassinated because of the riots. And I became a county councilman almost by accident. I got elected to the United States Senate when I had no intention of running at age 29. Then vice president of our first black president. Now president to the first women vice president. In my career, I've been told I was too young. By the way, they didn't let me on the Senate elevators for votes sometimes. Not a joke. And I've been told I'm too old. Whether young or old, I've always known what endures. I've known our North Star. The very idea of America is that we're all created equal and deserve to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I won't walk away from it now. I'm optimistic. I really am. I'm optimistic, Nancy. My fellow Americans, the issue facing our nation isn't how old we are, it's how old are our ideas. Hate, anger, revenge, retribution are the oldest of ideas. But you can't lead America with ancient ideas that only take us back. You lead America, the land of possibilities. You need a vision for the future and what can and should be done. Tonight you've heard mine. I see a future where defending democracy, you don't diminish it. I see a future where we restore the right to choose and protect our freedoms, not take them away. I see a future where the middle class finally has a fair shot and the wealthy have to pay their fair share in taxes. I see a future where we save the planet from the climate crisis and our country from gun violence. Above all, I see a future for all Americans. I see a country for all Americans. And I will always be president for all Americans because I believe in America. I believe in you, the American people. You're the reason we've never been more optimistic about our future than I am now. So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity when we act together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And there it is, President Biden delivering a feisty and animated State of the Union address tonight. Probably one of the most political addresses I have ever heard before a joint chamber at this time, drawing a sharp contrast with Republicans. And while he did not mention Donald Trump's name, he referred to his predecessor more than a dozen times, taunting Republicans at times. In a vigorous address, I want to bring in our chief political analyst, John Dickerson. John.
Yes, a stem winder, Nora. I'm going to pluck two words out of the speech that President Biden used. He used each of them 13 times. One is the one you just mentioned, predecessor or my predecessor. Referring to Donald Trump as a threat to American democracy as great as the one America faced in 1941 before World War II, you cannot set the stakes any higher than that in terms of defining who he is running against. The other word he used 13 times is fair. This is a policy argument he was making when he talked about lowering drug prices, helping teachers get paid more, helping others go up the ladder of opportunity, helping with housing. All of those policies, those are to help people who are, in the middle class and lower. And how's he going to pay for it? By increasing taxes on the wealthy and corporations. It's a populist pitch aimed at fairness. The speech will fade, but those two things, how he defines his opponent and that notion of fairness, is pretty much the argument from now until November.
Nancy Cordes is our chief White House correspondent. And Nancy, you cover this president closely. He's been criticized for sometimes flubbing a speech, going off script. Tonight was a bit different.
Nora, this seemed to me to be a speech designed first and foremost to show that Joe Biden has the stamina and the fire in the belly to go another 4 years. It was designed to be delivered with high energy. He even broke into a call and response at one point, and Democratic lawmakers played along. He told jokes, but he came out of the gate criticizing Donald Trump on Ukraine and then on January 6th. That was unexpected. He accused him of unleashing chaos when it comes to reproductive rights, of pandering to Vladimir Putin. It seemed to me that this White House understood that one of the biggest obstacles to re-election for him are the persistent voter questions about the president's age. And the White House set out to try to address those questions with a speech in which he ad-libbed about everything from taxes to Snickers.
And Robert Costa, I was struck by that, too. We've covered so many of these State of the Union addresses where the president begins with domestic issues. Foreign policy is not usually considered that interesting, but we are in a different era, and he began with Ukraine. He began with his predecessor and Putin and said, my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, do whatever the hell you want. saying he'll bow down. It's outrageous, it's dangerous, it's unacceptable.
Nora, sometimes timing is everything in politics. And what happened just days ago, Super Tuesday, former Ambassador Nikki Haley got out of the race. President Biden tonight making a pitch to Nikki Haley's voters, traditional Republicans who might feel like they don't have a home in Donald Trump's Republican Party. He's quoting Ronald Reagan. He's talking about January 6th, and he's saying to them, I'm building a coalition that's not only progressives and Democrats, but could include some Republicans. And you look at, sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words. You see President Biden there mingling on the House floor. Democrats all smiles. Some centrists from the New Jersey delegation there. I saw Senator Bernie Sanders come up with a big grin to say hello to President Biden. They're happy tonight. The president kicked off his campaign with a forceful speech, giving Democrats in that room and nationally a lot of confidence that he has what it takes for a rough campaign against Trump.
Speaking, you could hear Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas say, you were on fire. Danny Davis of Illinois saying, you fired us all up. Those guys represent moderates in the party and urban liberals. This may have been a partisan speech designed to be a campaign kickoff, a little different from most State of the Unions, but it meets the moment, the political moment we're in, and it's the speech Democrats have been desperately waiting for him to give.
And now the question is, can he do this in a non-staged setting? Can he get out there on the campaign trail and deliver this in those border states or in some of these swing states, something that his fellow Democrats have asked them to do more of? Don't just send the cabinet secretary to unveil the bridge that you say you built. Come yourself. They want to see the president more active.
One of those battleground states is the state of Georgia, which of course is going to be an upcoming trial that Donald Trump faces for fake electors there. And also in that state, of course, the very sad story about the student who was just murdered by an undocumented migrant.
And this was one of those somewhat unscripted moments when you saw Joe Biden enter the floor. He was confronted by Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. She's wearing a red Make America Great Again hat, but she also has a pin with Laken Riley. That's the name of that Georgia nursing student that the Homeland Security Secretary says they were not notified that the alleged killer had past offenses where he could have been deported, and he wasn't. So there is this back and forth blaming the federal government for what happened to this nursing student who was brutally murdered, allegedly, by a Venezuelan migrant. She has come to symbolize for some of these Republicans the lack of federal action. And he ad-libbed during that speech. He picked up the pen. He said her name. Laken Riley is someone that Donald Trump called the parents to express sympathies. And he has framed this about migrant crime on the campaign trail. Joe Biden tried to revive this bipartisan bill that he negotiated, or his White House negotiated with senators, that he laid out would have surged resources and actually delivered on some of these conservative priorities, as you mentioned, Nora, at the top of the program, were actually endorsed by Border Patrol.
One thing that was really striking to me, we were just seeing there President Biden interacting with Congressman Adam Schiff, who just faced a big primary in California, is he's losing among young voters. He's struggling to get the young vote. And this speech felt different. It was almost like he had written it and had prepared it for social media clips.
You cover technology for us.
Yes, and you can see this living on Instagram, living on Snapchat, living on TikTok, in these little moments to reach all the people who are definitely not watching tonight. And what's really interesting, too, on the economy, he's playing to people who really feel the pain of the current economic situation. He made a promise, though, that was entirely ad-libbed. He said the landing is and will be soft. That is implying that there will be no recession, that rates will come down, and jobs will be fine. That is a very, very big promise to be making when the road to inflation has been really bumpy, and Chairman Powell at the Fed has been very hesitant to cut rates.
One of the other things I would note here, Nora, is in the most extensive comments I have seen to date, the president did something that progressive voters have asked for, which is to acknowledge Palestinian casualties in this war in Gaza. He said upwards of 30,000 people killed. 3.5 pages on Israel and Hamas and that conflict. This is something that he saw at the ballot box, Democrats saying to him they don't support
And
policies.
we know that as we are approaching Ramadan, this is a key moment because the president hoping to get some sort of ceasefire before what could be a very dangerous situation as this humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding. Robert.
To build on what Jolene was saying with her excellent reporting, the headlines are going to be foreign policy, the nods to his predecessor, Donald Trump, but a lot of economic news in this speech. You see the president really making a pitch to labor voters, union voters nationwide. Sean Fain, the United Auto Workers president, up in the First Lady's box. And you saw him take on corporate America with strong language, address antitrust issues, corporate size and scope and power in this country. This was, as Ed said, a populist speech, a progressive speech. He needs those voters to come out, not be drifting towards Trump on the populist front, on the economy, not just on foreign policy.
Want to bring in Major Garrett because he's followed Congress and presidents so closely for so many years. Your take on his remarks tonight?
Let's not overcomplicate this, Nora. This was a base mobilization campaign speech. Yes, it has the trappings of the State of the Union address, but almost every policy priority the president identified, and even those, as Margaret mentioned, specifically referencing Palestinian civilian deaths in Gaza, is about shoring up and re-energizing a Democratic constituency in preparation for the general election campaign. In this era of negative partisanship, where the most important thing for a political leader to do is marshal and energize your base and then find whatever additional voters you can, tonight's speech was exactly tailored to that imperative.
And isn't that so critically important? Because we've seen the reason that Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in 7 of these battleground states and in most national polls is because he is underwater with his own base.
Continues to show there's a lack of enthusiasm among Democrats versus Republicans, less eagerness and excitedness to go out and vote.
And let me ask, because people have talked about President Biden's age. What did he show tonight? Was he trying to put to rest doubts about his vigor?
Absolutely. And they won't be put to rest by one speech. But he did prove he can go an hour or more. There were no major mistakes. And, you know, one of the biggest moments from his speech last year, Nora, was unscripted. It was on Social Security, where Republicans were booing, pushing back on a point he made. And he said, oh, well, you don't want to cut Social Security? OK, great. I'll take note of that. And it's almost like he said, OK, this year I'm going to do a lot more of that. And so he kept calling out Republicans saying, oh, you don't like my conservative border security bill?
I want to get the take of some of our contributors, Democrats, Republicans, who've been inside on many of these campaigns and know the ins and outs of that. Ashley Etienne, a Democrat who recently worked for Vice President Kamala Harris. Ashley, so good to have you. What did you make tonight of this remark and of the president's remarks, and do you think it puts to rest some of these concerns among the Democratic base?
Oh, absolutely. The president silenced all the haters tonight. It felt like he was Mayweather in a ring. He was just punch after punch after punch. I think the Democrats barely sat down. It was so high energy. And I agree with what everyone else has said. This speech was made for ads. I mean, if you look at the speech, it's short, pithy points. But the one part that I really, really appreciated about it is he addressed all of his vulnerabilities, from the border to the economy to abortion, and put the responsibility for inaction squarely at the doorstep of the Republican Party, and said on many occasions, bring me the bill, including on the border. Bring me the bill. I'll sign it. I'll take action to reinstate Roe versus Wade. So that's what I thought was so powerful about this speech. It was one of those speeches that I think not just is going to energize the base, but it's also targeted to those Nikki Haley voters that are trying to find a home. And I think they can find a home with all of these issues that the president laid out today.
And you can see as the chamber is emptying, many of the Democrats remaining. And the president, he's still there at 10:45. 10:45 at night. I want to bring in Terry Sullivan, our CBS News political contributor, who has worked for many Republican campaigns. And I want to ask you, Terry, because it was noteworthy to watch the House Speaker Mike Johnson for the first time there behind him. The times that he did stand up, the times that he didn't. Some of your colleagues, like Mike Murphy, have said, I never thought in my lifetime I would see a Republican House Speaker who won't stand and clap for stopping Russian military aggression into Europe. Your take?
Yeah, look, it is, in the State of the Union, the president is king. He controls the room, and it is difficult to be anybody else, be it in that room or even, as we're about to see, the follow-up speech is a difficult thing to follow, a tough act. He's in control, and he had a lot of energy tonight, and it was tough to understand, was this a campaign rally? Or was this a State of the Union speech? So I think he took a lot of Republicans flat-footed. He certainly had the energy, but I'm not sure that it was traditional, as you said, Nora, at the beginning. This was a much more political speech than a normal State of the Union. He seemed to be even trolling a lot of the Republicans, looking to engage them in a dialogue in this more so than give a typical State of the Union speech.
Terry Sullivan, right, bringing up that word trolling. That was sort of a remark we made as well. He was engaging with them on many different occasions. I want to go to Scott McFarland because he was actually in the room. He covers Congress for us. Scott, what did you see?
Two different people removed during the course of this address, Nora, both in the upper levels. They were spectators, one screaming about the death of a U.S. service member. Another person just behind me yelled, "You lie," when the president was addressing issues involving the Middle East. But what strikes me most, if the president is back here next year, wins re-election, gives another State of the Union address, dozens of the people he was looking at on the floor will not. There's a retirement wave underway in Congress right now. By the dozens, people are calling it quits, leaving at the end of this year, frustrated by the gridlock and the toxicity of the politics in Washington. And I'll note something else, Nora. This is always an extraordinary day, the State of the Union Day in Congress. It kind of already was an extraordinary day in Congress. The phone lines were jammed by angry TikTok users. Congress today moved swiftly towards a bill that could lead to TikTok either divesting from its Chinese-based company or getting banned in America. That consumed this day before this historic address.
Scott McFarland, thank you. All right, when we come back, Alabama Senator Katie Britt will have the Republican response to tonight's State of the Union.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is CBS.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Welcome back to CBS News coverage of President Biden's State of the Union. It is now time for the Republican response, and we're about to hear from the youngest Republican woman ever elected to the Senate, Britt of Alabama. For more on why the party chose her, let's go to our congressional correspondent, Nicole Killian at the Capitol. Nicole?
Well, Nora, Senator Britt is considered a rising star within the Republican Party, and her name has even been tossed around as a potential vice presidential pick for former President Trump. At 42, as you mentioned, she is the youngest Republican woman in the U.S. Senate, the first female senator elected from the state of Alabama. She has 2 school-aged children, and that is something she is likely to lean into in this speech, calling the Republican Party the party of parents and working families. You can also expect that she is going to draw a very sharp contrast with President Biden, depicting him as too old, out of pace, out of touch. In fact, according to excerpts, she will say our commander-in-chief is not in command and call him a dithering and diminished leader. You can also expect she'll touch on GOP talking points from crime to the border, foreign policy. She considers this speech a huge honor.
Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Here now, Senator Britt.
Good evening, America. My name is Britt, and I have the honor of serving the people of the great state of Alabama in the United States Senate. However, that's not the job that matters most. I am a proud wife and mom of 2 school-aged kids. My daughter Bennett and my son Ridgway are why I ran for the Senate. I'm worried about their future and the future of children in every corner of our nation. And that's why I invited you into our home tonight. Like so many families across America, my husband Wesley and I just watched President Biden's State of the Union address from our living room. And what we saw was the performance of a permanent politician who has actually been in office for longer than I've been alive. One thing was quite clear, though. President Biden just doesn't get it. He's out of touch. Under his administration, families are worse off, our communities are less safe, and our country is less secure. I just wish he understood what real families are facing around kitchen tables just like this one. You know, this is where our family has tough conversations. It's where we make hard decisions. It's where we share the good, the bad, and the ugly of our days. It's where we laugh together, and it's where we hold each other's hands and pray for God's guidance. And many nights, to be honest, it's where Wesley and I worry. I know we're not alone. And so tonight, the American family needs to have a tough conversation, because the truth is, we're all worried about the future of our nation. The country we know and love seems to be slipping away, and it feels like the next generation will have fewer opportunities and less freedoms than we did. I worry my own children may not even get a shot at living their American dreams. My American dream allowed me, the daughter of 2 small business owners from rural Enterprise, Alabama, to be elected to the United States Senate at the age of 40. Growing up, sweeping the floor at my dad's hardware store and cleaning the bathroom at my mom's dance studio, I never could have imagined what my story would entail. To think about what the American dream can do across just one generation, in just one lifetime, it's truly breathtaking. But right now, the American dream has turned into a nightmare for so many families. The true, unvarnished state of our union begins and ends with this: Our families are hurting. Our country can do better. And you don't have to look any further than the crisis at our southern border to see it. President Biden inherited the most secure border of all time. But minutes after taking office, he suspended all deportations, he halted construction of the border wall, and he announced a plan to give amnesty to millions. We know that President Biden didn't just create this border crisis, he invited it with 94 executive actions in his first 100 days. When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12. She told me not just that she was raped every day, but how many times a day she was raped. The cartels put her on a mattress in a shoebox of a room, and they sent men through that door over and over again for hours and hours on end. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable. From fentanyl poisonings to horrific murders, there are empty chairs tonight at kitchen tables just like this one because of President Biden's senseless border policies. Just think about Lake and Riley. In my neighboring state of Georgia, this beautiful 22-year-old nursing student went out on a jog one morning, but she never got the opportunity to return home. She was brutally murdered by one of the millions of illegal border crossers President Biden chose to release into our homeland. Y'all, as a mom, I can't quit thinking about this. I mean, this could have been my daughter. This could have been yours. And tonight, President Biden finally said her name. But he refused to take responsibility for his own actions. Mr. President, enough is enough. Innocent Americans are dying, and you only have yourself to blame. Fulfill your oath of office, reverse your policies, end this crisis, and stop the suffering. Sadly, we know that President Biden's failures don't stop there. His reckless spending dug our economy into a hole and sent the cost of living through the roof. We have the worst inflation in 40 years and the highest credit card debt in our nation's history. Let that sink in. Hardworking families are struggling to make ends meet today. And with soaring mortgage rates and sky-high childcare costs, they're also struggling to how to plan for tomorrow. The American people are scraping by, while President Biden proudly proclaims that Bidenomics is working. Goodness, y'all, bless his heart, we know better. I'll never forget stopping at a gas station in Chilton County one evening. The gentleman working the counter told me that after retiring, He had to pick up a job in his 70s so that he didn't have to choose between going hungry or going without his medication. He said, I did everything right. I did everything I was told to do. I worked hard, I saved, I was responsible. He's not alone. I hear similar concerns from fellow parents, whether I am walking with my friends or whether I'm at my kids' games. But let's be honest, it's been a minute since Joe Biden pumped gas, ran a carpool, or even pushed a grocery cart. Meanwhile, the rest of us see our dollar and we know it doesn't go as far. We see it every day. And despite what he tells you, our communities are not safer. For years, the left has coddled criminals and defunded the police, all while letting repeat offenders walk free. The result is tragic, but foreseeable. From our small towns to America's most iconic city streets, life is getting more and more dangerous. And unfortunately, President Biden's weakness isn't just hurting families here at home. He is making us a punchline on the world stage. Look, where I'm from, your word is your bond. But for 3 years, the president has demonstrated that America's word doesn't mean what it used to. From abandoning our allies in his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan to desperately pushing another dangerous deal with Iran. President Biden has failed. We've become a nation in retreat, and the enemies of freedom, they see an opportunity. Putin's brutal aggression in Europe has put our allies on the brink. Iran's terrorist proxies have slaughtered Israeli, Jews, and American citizens. They've targeted commercial shipping, and they've attacked our troops nearly 200 times since October, killing 3 U.S. soldiers and 2 Navy SEALs. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party is undercutting America's workers. China is buying up our farmland, spying on our military installations, and spreading propaganda through the likes of TikTok. You see, the CCP knows that if it conquers the minds of our next generation, it conquers America. And what does President Biden do? Well, he bans TikTok for government employees, but creates an account for his own campaign. Y'all, you can't make this stuff up. Look, we all recall when presidents faced national security threats with strength and resolve. That seems like ancient history. Right now, our commander-in-chief is not in command. The free world deserves better than a dithering and diminished leader. America deserves leaders who recognize that secure borders, stable prices, safe streets, and a strong defense are actually the cornerstones of a great nation. Just ask yourself, are you better off now than you were 3 years ago? There's no doubt we're at a crossroads, and it doesn't have to be this way. We all feel it. But here's the good news. We, the people, are still in the driver's seat. We get to decide whether our future will grow brighter or whether we'll settle for an America in decline. Well, I know which choice our children deserve, and I know the choice the Republican Party is fighting for. We are the party of hard-working parents and families, and we want to give you and your children the opportunities to thrive. And we want families to grow. It's why we strongly support continued nationwide access to in vitro fertilization. We want to help loving moms and dads bring precious life into this world. Wesley and I believe there is no greater blessing in life than our children. And that's why tonight, I want to make a direct appeal to the parents out there, and in particular to my fellow moms, many of whom I know will be up tossing and turning at 2 a.m., wondering how you're going to be in 3 places at once and then somehow still get dinner on the table. First of all, we see you, we hear you, and we stand with you. I know you're frustrated. I know you're probably disgusted by most of what you see going on in Washington, and I'll be really honest with you, you're not wrong for feeling that way. Look, I get it. The task in front of us isn't an easy one, but I can promise you one thing. It is worth it. So I am asking you, for the sake of your kids and your grandkids, get into the arena. Every generation has been called to do hard things. American greatness rests in the fact that we always answer that call. It's who we are. Never forget, we are steeped in the blood of patriots who overthrew the most powerful empire in the world. We walk in the footsteps of pioneers who tamed the wild. We now carry forward the same flame of freedom as the liberators of an oppressed Europe. We continue to draw courage from those who bent the moral arc of the universe. And when we gaze upon the heavens, never forget that our DNA contains the same ingenuity that put man on the moon. America has been tested before, and every single time we've emerged unbowed and unbroken. Our history has been written with the grit of men and women who got knocked down. But we know their stories because they did not stay down. We are here because they stood back up. So now it's our turn, our moment to stand up and prove ourselves worthy of protecting the American dream. Together, we can reawaken the heroic spirit of a great nation. Because America, we don't just have a rendezvous with destiny. We take destiny's hand and we lead it. Our future starts around kitchen tables just like this, with moms and dads just like you. And you are why I believe with every fiber of my being that despite the current state of our union, our best days are still ahead. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless these United States of America.
And that was Republican Senator Katie Britt of Alabama at home there in her kitchen, really delivering a message of fear and concern out there that she says voters have. At the end, though, trying to end on a hopeful note. Jolene Kent.
You know, she was tapping directly into the anxieties people feel about crime and safety, the economy, the border. She really didn't hold back. But what was interesting is she ended on this note, never forget, we're steeped in the blood of the patriots who overthrew the most powerful empire in the world. And then right after that, she pivoted and said, best days are still ahead. It was an interesting contrast. She drew that repeatedly through the speech.
She did not mention Donald Trump at all.
She never mentioned the leader of her party. She had a lot to say about Joe Biden. Really nothing to say about Donald Trump, the man who is running to beat Joe Biden in November. What she really represents for the Republican Party is the women, the younger voters, perhaps more moderate wing of the party that they need to bring back into the fold if Donald Trump is going to have any chance of being victorious in November.
And from the state of Alabama, she specifically referenced that decision to codify protections for IVF, which 2 weeks ago were just shut down by the courts there. I mean, she was chosen and made that very clear. She, as I understand it, actually helped to explain IVF to some of her fellow Republican senators in private meetings in the wake of that court decision. She's known for being a substantive person on the issues.
Which is needed because I understand and House Speaker Mike Johnson today called IVF a new technology, even though that it has been around for decades. So having her perspective certainly helps the Republican Party. She is also the third woman who has been chosen in a row to respond to the president of the United States, the Republican Party choosing women to respond to the president. Women are the majority of voters in America, and there is still a gender gap.
There is a gender gap, and when I talk to Senate Republicans, many of them say privately they would love for Senator Katie Britt to be the face of the party. But privately and publicly, Republicans acknowledge the face of the party is former President Donald Trump, someone who was on his social media account tonight defending his conduct on January 6th, and in just a few weeks is going to be sitting in a courtroom in New York in a criminal trial about hush money payments to a porn star. That is the likely Republican nominee. Katie Britt is someone they are elevating tonight, but they are behind Trump wholesale in the GOP.
It was a State of the Union address and a response, but also tonight, clearly, the kickoff of the 2024 presidential campaign. We'll be right back.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
And we're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case. It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is CBS.
Hello, everyone.
sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents.
Welcome back. I want to thank our incredible team here at CBS News. Our coverage of the State of the Union will continue on CBS News streaming, your late local news, and then tomorrow on CBS Mornings. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington. Good night.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this.
What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in Did any of that make sense? What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Dickerson, anchor of CBS News Primetime. You've been watching CBS News special coverage of President Biden's State of the Union address. An encore presentation is next. I'll see you later.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
If China invades Taiwan, what will the U.S. Navy do?
Here in Tel Aviv, second siren in about 10 minutes.
This Humvee just pulled up and said, it's time to leave.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. See you on Primetime, streaming free everywhere.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
Record-breaking storm surge and devastating wind.
every second counts.
The mud punched a hole right through the wall.
See, hear, feel the forecast. Tonight on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
This is a CBS News special report. President Biden's State of the Union address and the Republican response.
Good evening. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington for tonight's State of the Union address. It is a pivotal moment for President Biden, arguably the most important of his 50-year political career, as he hopes to convince Americans to give him 4 more years in office. As we look live inside the House chamber in the U.S. Capitol, the president's challenge tonight is to sell his vision for America and address voters' doubts